Hey everyone, hope you all are well. For today's look, the first thing I'm doing as always is priming the eye area. I start with this step because a primer will help your shadows to grip to the eye area, making them last all day long. It'll also prevent creasing and it'll allow them to glide on nice and smoothly. I've used the Urban Decay Primer Potion as it's a favourite of mine, but any primer will do. The final palette that I have from the Colourpop X Animal Crossing collection is the Nook ink palette. If you've missed my other two tutorials, I'll link them below. I absolutely adore this collection for so many reasons, but I had high hopes for this palette as the other two were a hit. The first shadow that I'm taking is called Made in the Shade. This eyeshadow is, I suppose, a light to medium minty green. It's a semi-matte, I would say, in that it's got these gorgeous little silvery sparkly flecks in it, but they aren't really apparent in the overall look. So I'd say it's a matte shadow, but infused with a bit of sparkle. I'm adding this shadow into the crease and it's nice and opaque. It's not very powdery in the pan at all. It just applies and blends really well. So I start by sweeping it back and forward in the crease, and then when I've little to no product left on my brush, I place it on the edge of the shadow and I start blending back and forward again just to start to fade the colour up towards the brow bone. You want it to fade to nothing the closer to the brow bone that it gets. I'm just adding a second layer of this shadow now. As I said, it blends really well, it builds very well, and I'm just really happy with the overall quality of this shadow in particular. Then I'm taking a small bullet shaped brush, and I'm always asked about this brush. My very first sponsorship years and years ago was with Vanity Planet. I used their vegan brush collection in a video, and this is part of that collection. I still love and use it every day, and I like it especially for fading colour down along the lower lash line. Next then, I'm taking the shade Yes Yes, and this is a gorgeous frosty light aqua blue shade. It has a lovely almost creamy consistency to it, which is why I didn't use a setting spray or water or anything like that initially like I usually would. It applies and blends very easily onto the lid area, as you can see, and just one layer is actually fine on its own. But I did decide to go back in and add a second layer, but this time I wet my brush just to see what kind of an impact that I would get. But the shadow really speaks for itself by itself. You don't need to use a setting spray or water or anything of the sort to get those shimmery particles popping. I mean, just look at it. To add some depth to the look now, I'm taking the eyeshadow Water Landing. This is a deep teal shadow and it's a matte finish. I'm picking up some of this shadow on a small tapered blending brush, and I'm starting to work this onto the outer third of the lid, just covering up that blank space that I have on the outer portion of the eye. I was expecting this shadow to be really pigmented, being that it's a matte shadow and it's very dark. It's not, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the first layer of the shadow gives me a light appearance, but it's a shade that's buildable, which I love. So once I've added the first layer on there, I'm repeating the process. I'm blending that shadow onto the outer portion of the eye and then blending it across into the crease very carefully, adding it like a halo over that sparkly lid shade. Once I get to that outer corner as well, as usual, I'm just flicking my brush upwards and outwards. I'm pulling the shadow in that direction towards the tail of my brow to give me a nice elongated shape to the eye. To make sure both of the matte shades blend seamlessly into one another, I'm going back in with my fluffy brush that I used to apply the first shade, and I'm using what's left on my brush to run over the edges of the look to make sure they're nice and soft and blended. Then I'm going back in with the bullet shaped brush, this time with that darker teal, and I'm sweeping some of this shadow down along the lower lash line. It's actually mad the difference of these shadows in comparison to the similar tones in the Naked Wild West palette. This palette is so much cheaper and it's much easier to work with. No mess, no fallout, no fuss with blending. I wanted to add a further bit of depth now, so I'm taking this shadow called Corrupt from Makeup Geek, and it's just a singular matte black shadow, and I'm using a little C-shaped brush to wriggle that black eyeshadow on the outer portion of the eye, just above the lash line, and I'm starting by creating a little tail, a little wing shape, and then I'm pulling the shadow slightly across the lash line and then angling it up towards the crease. Then I'm just lightly smoking this shadow out, just blending over and back and coating that outer third very lightly. Then I'm taking an angled brush, and this is actually another brush from the Vanity Planet vegan brush set that I was talking about before, and I'm using that just to press some shadow along the upper lash line from outer to inner corner. To line my waterline then, I'm using this dark green liner from Urban Decay. It's got little golden flecks in it, and I'm just running this back and forward inside the eye. Then I'm picking back up that angled brush and I'm wriggling some of the black eyeshadow just into the lash line on that outer portion of the eye, tapping the brush down and then wriggling back and forward. I'm then going back in with that tapered blending brush and I'm running this underneath the black to make sure it's nice and soft and smoky. If your eyes are sensitive like mine and tend to water, make sure you blink often, and I know that sounds stupid, but it does help and it does prevent a leaky eye, I find. You don't want your makeup ruined at this point. We're nearly done. So then I'm taking CEO, and this is the glitter in the palette. It's got a base of a greeny blue and then it's got these silvery white flecks of glitter. You could use a spray or a glitter glue, but I'm just tapping the glitter down over the top of that glitzy lid shade to give it a bit more sparkle. I'm then switching to another little bullet shaped brush and I've mixed Yes Yes with the glitter, and now I'm adding that combination around the tear duct of the eye. I've added some of the Be Belle Daisy lashes, and now I'm using the Mega Length mascara from Wet n Wild to add a couple of coats to my bottom lashes, and then I'm combing it through my upper lashes to blend them in with the false ones, but then that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful and easy to follow. If you did, please do let me know, and if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see next, do comment below, and I'll catch you all very soon.